Hello, everyone. My name is Anurag, and I am a cloud architect and an AWS data hero. And I'm currently based in Gothenburg, in Sweden. I have been working in various companies. I have worked in startups, I have worked in enterprises. And throughout this journey, I have been in and out of various roles. I started as a database developer. I wrote quite a bit of Java, and then one day I had this chance to work in a startup where I started going into the data world. When I took this journey into the world of data, DevOps, cloud, there were a few questions that came across, and I had few reflections, and I wanted to share some of those with you. Um, I'm in between jobs at the moment. That's why you don't see an employer on my slide. But yes, I'll be employed in a few days. So here we go. So what we are going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about three things. I'm going to talk about the evolution of DevOps as I see from my perspective. This is a reflection of my personal growth, my personal, let's say, journey. So it might be a little bit different for you, but don't worry, it's not related to, it's not extremely related to the topic that we're trying to study today. I'll take a moment and I'll also talk about the state of data analytics and what kind of problems that I see in the data and analytics space. This also has some level of, let's say, overview or some level of things that DevOps world kind of forgot when we are talking about data as in general. And then I will touch base upon data mesh, which is the core topic of today's session, and I talk about a little bit about its principles and how data mesh kind of promises or helps us to rethink on how we think of data and DevOps and how they can work together. So, yeah, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to talk about the journey through the DevOps area. I started in a typical company, and in this typical company, it's a big enterprise, and there was nothing as DevOps defined at that point. This is back in 2014. Again, at least I had not heard about DevOps. And before DevOps, I was working in a team setup where we had a big chunk of an ops team that was centralized, sitting somewhere. There was a wall between us, an invisible wall that we were not aware of. We didn't even know where this ops team were. And we were one of these dev teams. And as a typical dev team setup, we worked on a bunch of code. We wrote a little bit of Java, a little bit of SQL, and all of those things. And when we were ready, we used to build build those software out of it. And through the build pipeline, the ops teams magically got an artifact, which they figured that, okay, we have an artifact now and we need to run this in production. And when you look around, you see, okay, I'm not the only dev team around here. There are like plenty of dev teams, and these ops teams are basically the guardians of the galaxy. And the galaxy here is nothing but a bunch of code and configurations that is running on some servers somewhere in the background or behind or below the desks of these particular people, and somehow this is providing a lot of value to the customers that we are trying to serve. It came as a surprise. It's like we suffered a lot of problems. We never knew why the build failed. We never knew if the application was performing the way it was performing in our systems, in test or dev, in QA. So there was a lot of these problems. I was young. I wanted to have certain answers, and that led me to a little bit of a discovery kind of phase. I started looking into literature. I started looking into conferences, meetups, you name it. I did it. And during that particular phase, I had like this epiphany. I had like this first view of DevOps. I heard the word DevOps for the first time, but I was naive, like any other kid out there, and I thought that DevOps was all about CI/CD. It was about tools. It was about figuring out how to use GitOps. It was about using management configuration management tools like Ansible. Or if you are one of those hot companies out there who are trying to get onto the cloud, you would also talk about infrastructure as code, Terraform, and yada yada. This all got me fascinated. I felt like, okay, DevOps is such a nice area of working, and I tried to delve further. This is when I found the seminal book, like a Bible of my journey in the DevOps world, and that was the Phoenix Project. Now, Phoenix Project is, as you might know, it's a very well-known book in this particular space, and it really does not. It's not a typical technical book. It's rather a novel, and if you have not yet read it, I highly recommend that you should read it. And this kind of toppled my world upside down. Um, it introduced me to the real world of DevOps, which was cross-functional teams. So there were a bunch of people who were trying to build a product, and in this cross-functional team, we brought together two people who never really talked to each other, dev people and ops people. To help them, we also brought in a designer who helped them make choices. Okay, is this product, is it really user friendly? What the kind of, let's say, users we were um, trying to address? At the same time, having a good product, having shorter feedback loops was not enough. So we also started introducing information security, QA people into the mix so that we can ensure that the product is secure as well as the product is of the quality that the customer is expecting. To manage all of this, we also introduced a new persona called as product manager, whose role was to ensure that the life cycle of the product was maintained well, that we are hitting the KPIs, that we are figuring out, we are talking to the customers, we are, let's say, bringing back the feedback and from the real customers, and everybody on the team, the designer, the dev, the ops and infosec people are listening to this particular feedback, and so that we can realign our product so that it meets the customer expectations. Now, cross-functional teams alone were not enough. If you are following the DevOps world, you will go even further, and you will start looking into things like, what are the different value streams do I have within that particular value stream so that I can deliver value to the business or to the customers. We start building multiple, let's say, product teams, and these product teams are essentially bundled together, and they are producing value towards the customer or towards the company. This is all working good. We also had, during this particular phase, we had an epiphany, and we kind of, let's say, figured out, okay, if we are going to have product teams that are scattered across, we are essentially, there are components that we could reuse, and that's where platform engineering was born, and yada yada. But even all throughout this particular phase, I failed to see where did a data person fit. I did not see the product teams considering data as their deliverable. They did not see data as an integral part of their team. Many of these teams were struggling to make optimizations, making data-driven decisions. They wanted to use this new fancy word that everybody was coming along at the time, machine learning, and now AI and ML. And they wanted to ingrain that into their product, but they were struggling quite a lot about this. It didn't make sense. If we are struggling with a lot of these data kind of issues, why don't we have data personas integrated into your application teams or integrated in your product teams? So then I was, again, I started looking uh, into uh, into this particular space, looking at literature, and also started gathering some anecdotal evidence. I asked our existing data and analytics team, and I also asked a few friends I knew from other organizations that were data heavy, or they were using a lot of data into their day-to-day life. And I figured out that across these different organizations, across these multiple geographies, across these various teams, everybody more or less were trying to do data in this particular fashion. So the work model that most data analytics team used was, at the heart of the data and analytics team, there is generally a data warehouse, a data lake, or a data lake house, which is a hybrid of these two. And then we have a few people who are managing this data lake, data warehouse, or data lake house, whatever you have it. So these are bunch of people, typically consisting of data engineers, BI engineers, in some cases, data scientists, machine learning engineers, ML ops engineers, whatever. But I also found that the people in this ecosystem, or the people in this particular model, they were heavily outnumbered. You would always find that the ratio of developers to people working in data and analytics team was heavily skewed. Now, this team of superheroes, as I like to call them, they were like they were the heartbeat of the data ecosystem, about the ecosystem. So we started writing. So this typically this data analytics team starts looking at, they build applications. So they go to applications and write either ELT or ETL pipelines that then go into the, let's say, application world, figure out what their data is, figure out the condition of the data, and bring that data from your transaction systems and put it in their area of control, which is a lake house or a data warehouse or whatever paradigm that they're using behind the scenes. And soon you will find that these few people that you can basically count on the top of your fingertips, they are serving more than one applications. And typically these are few dozens to a few hundreds of applications that are being served by few of these people. And then when the data is replenished, the data lake house is complete or data warehouse is complete. Um, some of these magicians then put out reports that are used by business. They put out dashboards that many of our business folks are using. And if you're lucky and if you're working in a good organization, you might be also be doing some machine learning or some sort of AI on top of it. Now, this model might look a little bit familiar, right? So there are plenty of snags, or there are plenty of issues with this particular model. There is a heavy bottleneck. The things are not, let's say, fast enough, because again, the skewed ratio of people around dev and in the data and analytics. So it was not fast enough. They always become a bottleneck. You had to always wait for the people from data analytics to be available. There were data quality issues because the ETL is a very brittle kind of, let's say, pipeline. Every time an application made a change, they added a new column, they added a new entity into the database, the entire, let's say, ETL or ELT pipeline changes, and then it causes data quality issues, or sometimes even the things stop at all altogether. You will also see that the product owners or product managers kind of complain, this is not what I asked from the data analytics team. This is not the report that I asked. This is not what I had in mind when I said I want a report from you. And most of the time, the data and analytics team also are trying to play catch up, because it's simply a lot of work and they don't have a lot of time at hand. This also leads to shadow IT, where then some of these applications are like, yeah, with the to hell with the data analytics team, I'm just gonna figure out and go buy a product out of the market and try to do whatever they are doing in house. I mean, doesn't this all sound familiar, right? So these were the exact things that were happening when we had dev and ops as separate teams. We were doing the same thing in the application space, and somehow when the application space is moved on, the data space is not moving on, right? We are having the same kind of dev and ops issues in the data space. So this is where I started looking into, what can I do as an architect? What can I as a person try to influence in my organization? And this is where I came across this new architectural concept called as data mesh. Now, data mesh is, as per this is a great definition from the author, or the person who has wrote about this book. So data mesh is basically an approach where it advocates for decentralization of data analytics. It says that Data mesh is is a socio-technical approach which allows us to share access and manage analytical data in complex environments. And it can be with or within the organization, within the organization or across the organizations. Now, the data mesh has four key pillars to its principles, or its four key principles, which basically says the data should belong to the domain or to the products that are producing the data. In our in the way the data analytics teams are working, although the data belongs to the product team, the ownership of the data that is produced by that particular product is on the some other third party team. So it says, hold on, shift left, let the people who are producing the data own that particular data. Now, owning the data itself is not going to be enough. We need to start treating data as a product. So far, data was always thought of as something that just happens, or analytics is something that just happens if you are doing transactions or business. But we need to move away from that, and we need to think of data as product. Now, to produce these data products in a certain consistent fashion, we need to start providing common tools and common standards that all of these different product teams can use so that we have consistent interfaces. So it tells that the third pillar is a self-service data platform that these product teams can use and start creating these data products. And now once we have the data product, it's not enough just to have the data products. We need to make sure that the people who need this data within this our entire landscape have access to that particular data. So it calls for federated governance, which basically means you need to start treating the data product as you treat your application, as you treat your APIs right now. You need to protect it through API keys. You need to have let's say automation in place that allows people to make access to that particular data. You need to provide contracts, and so that you can make sure that the downstream application, when they get data, they know what kind of data to expect from your application. This is all good in theory. Let's try to take a moment and see if we can visualize this data mesh. So in a typical, let's say, big environment, a data mesh thing would typically start with a centralized data enabling platform. So this is where platform engineering kind of comes in, and this data engineering, this enablement platform provides the required compute, cataloging, policy, and governance tools that are required for applications to start producing the data products. So let's say an application now says that, okay, I'm ready to shift left. I am a product team. I am going to have data personas in my team. So they will come in and they will utilize the services of this data platform, and they will produce something called as data and metadata, which together kind of forms as a data product. Now, if this data product is available for anybody to use, the data analytics team, instead of building ETL pipeline that goes into the application and pulls the data, they will just pick the data up where the application team has, or the product team has made it available, and they can just take that data into their data warehouse or lakehouse, and then start building reports, dashboards that the business can use. Now, in some other cases, now again, none of the new conferences are complete without using the word Gen AI. So if we are trying to use if you are trying to use data for fine tuning your applications, then some of the applications would be like, okay, I'll use the data platform to create this data product, and I'll feed this data into the data and modify the Gen AI by using RAG as a way of doing it, retrieval augmented generation. And that will allow them to use local feedback loops and use Gen AI into their own products. Also, they could do data science and do plain old machine learning on top of it. So if we are able to, let's say, if we are able to follow the recommendations of data mesh, we will be in a position to build a new type of cross-functional team that also has data stewards or data engineers as an integral part of the product team. Now, there would be some product where they might require, instead of a data engineer, they might require a data analyst, or they might require a data scientist, or if a data steward does not have a lot of work in that particular product team, maybe the product manager takes on the role and and uses that particular role as 10% of their job. So this is how the new product teams will look like if we are to follow the data mesh principles. Now, if you follow the data mesh principles, you will be in a position where the data from your product teams is visible, it's articulated, it has let's say contracts that people can use, people can trust the data, and it is available for free access within your organization, which then opens up a lot of these possibilities in which you can use this for your AI ML kind of use cases, as well as enabling local optimizations. Now, this is all good, this is all awesome, but data mesh cannot happen overnight. There, you need to spend your blood, sweat, and tears, as they call it, in order to make sure that you are in a position to build a data mesh kind of principle, use it as a guiding principle for your data strategy. Now, here are some prerequisites that you need to have in order to make sure that your application area or your company is ready for this data mesh transformation. So for the first thing you need to start is you need to have a cleared and defined ownership model in your application landscape. Now you need to look up this word that I'm going to say. There is a whole area of uh, architecture principle called as domain-driven design. And domain-driven design basically advocates for something called as bounded contexts and context maps. So these are nothing but a way of defining the clear boundaries around your applications and what are the areas your product teams are responsible within that particular boundaries. The context map also says that how are these products supposed to talk to each other. There are multiple ways of doing it. We don't have time to cover today that, unfortunately. But yes, in order to make sure that you're ready for the data mesh, you need to start with breaking down your application landscape, breaking down your transactional landscape to have clear ownership models, clear differentiation of products, clear line of control between them so that you can build those data teams independently. You also need to have management structures that allows autonomy in product teams. So if a product team says that, okay, I need a data scientist, but tomorrow they may say, I don't really need a data scientist, but data analyst, you should be able to, your management structure should be able to allow to do that. I have learned the hard way that if you want to implement data mesh, you need to start this data mesh implementation from top down. I tried in my previous job to do this bottom up, where it's basically engineers coming up and saying that, okay, we need to have data mesh so that we are ready for the future. It never really works. It's too hard. So I think this thing needs to start from the executives, and if you are a leader in your organization, a technical leader, you should look for executive sponsorship and ask and use this as a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach. You'll also need to have read a book called as Team Topologies, which kind of talks about what are the different types of teams you need to have, what are the producing teams, what are the enabling teams, what are platform teams, and that kind of, let's say, definition will ensure that when you are ready for this movement towards data mesh, you have the right ingredients in place. And final thing, data mesh is all about enabling your data enabling your engineers, your developers, the people who are going to look at the data, bring it up, and give this to your organization, produce value for you. So you need to focus on developer experience. You need to focus on building tools that your developers will be happy to use. That's it from me now. This is only so much we can cover in 20-25 minutes. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section, and we have a few minutes here. I'm going to try to answer those. And also, if you feel like you want to ask about data mesh later, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you. Thank you very much. All right, I see there are a couple of questions, and I'll try to address them. What is the difference between a data lake and a data warehouse? Data lake house is a new term to me. Yes, absolutely. So data warehouse essentially uses relational databases or massively parallel databases behind the scenes to create this analytics for you. But data lake uses modern cloud constructs. Basically, it uses services like AWS S3 as their storage and compute pattern. So it's a very high level, let's say, distinction that I'm trying to make, but that's the core difference in data warehouse and data lake. I would recommend that if you are interested in looking into more, look up for a gentleman called as James Serra, who works at Microsoft, and he has a great video on YouTube where he goes on into this. Goes on to talk about the differences between lakehouse, data mesh, data fabric, and data lakehouse as well. And again, to answer the last part of the question, lakehouse is an approach where you try to bring in the best of both worlds into a single technological construct uh, uh, in there. Uh, the second thing is more about reflection. So it basically says, "Wow, heard about the Phoenix project. Need to get it on my next read." Definitely do. There is also something called as the DevOps project, if I'm not mistaken. So that is going to be a really good read if you're interested in knowing about the real DevOps kind of DevOps way of working. With that said, I think I have answered both of the questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.